do it. There are other songs that led up to it.
I disagree with that. I mean, that's documenting maybe a situation of someone who's in a place where they would commit suicide, just the way a novel might, just the way a movie might, just like Taxi Driver, or, I mean, we could find lots of examples of films and books where something like that is portrayed. It's not endorsing it. It sounds to me like, you know, your son had a lot of problems, and, you know, the fact that he listened to, you know, Ozzy Osbourne did not drive him to commit suicide. It sounds like he was in a depressed place.
You've been involved in this scene, right? You've listened to Ozzy Osbourne?
I'm a songwriter, and basically what we are thinking, I don't know if I can speak for all of us, but I can speak for myself. When I'm writing a song, it's just something like, it's our own method of freedom of speech and whatever, just like you guys are free to sit up there on the stage right now and speak your mind, you know. It's just our way of speaking out in whatever terms we feel are right, and I think that there should not be any way that we should be censored, like, because we're not saying that you can't say what you're saying right now. And so
is this a censorship issue? Doesn't that seem, well,
it
you
isn't
say
at all.
it isn't.
And not only that, do you think there's anything wrong with having the lyrics on the jacket of the record so people can read them?
Well, a lot of records already have the lyrics on the inside cover of the record.
But that means you have to buy the record first before you can actually read them.
But Carol, would that really help anything? Would it have helped his son? I mean, if there had been a mark on that record, I hear from a lot of people that if you put a mark on a record that is the equivalent of an X rating, that it's going to boost the sales of that record.
Fine. If it does, at least those loving parents who care will have the opportunity, because now there's been so much attention brought to this issue. They will start to look and listen and make that decision themselves as to whether or not they want their children listening.
Would you have banned your son from listening maybe to that?
If I had done everything in my power to not let him listen to the music.
Let's talk to Don Wilkinson for a second, who is a child psychologist and dealt with this kind of problem. From what you've seen and when you heard this discussion, what kind of evidence is there that the things we're talking about would have an effect?
What we're dealing with here is one piece of complex behavior if the suicide issue is the issue. As far as the social sciences know at this time, no single piece of behavior is precipitated by any one factor. There's always multiple factors involved.
We've got a member of, we've got several members of a local band called Exodus with us in the audience. I'm wondering what you think when you do a song that has suggestive lyrics, when you write one, when you act on the stage as some of the heavy metal groups do. You've got a heavy metal group. What's the motivation? What are you doing? Are you just having fun? Are you out to influence somebody or what?
It's just really what we want to sing about, you know. That's more or less what it is. We're real, you know, you could go rent a movie at a rental place with the most graphic horror right there, you know, that all this stuff is coming down on us, and, you know, we just do it for fun. It's what we want to do.
Well, why write about some of the things you write about? What motivates you to write about Satan, for example, if you do?
It's just an interesting topic. Occult and witchcraft has always been a very interesting topic.
We're going to take a look at a clip from one of your videos that you recently did. This is the band Exodus. In case you don't know, this is not MTV, this is KQED, and the name of the song was Piranha by the group Exodus. I couldn't understand the lyrics, and that was one of the things that we tried very hard to do to figure out if kids could be influenced by lyrics, but if they can't understand them, what were you saying there?
Well, the song is about piranhas. You know, they're really a little vicious, friendly fish, and it's something that we wanted to write about.
Well, parents should have the right to censor their children on what they do and don't want them to read, listen to, or hear. If parents have that right taken away from them, then we've lost everything.
What age group kids are you talking about?
I think it's up to the parents. If the parents have that child in their home and they're paying the freight, then obviously the parent should have the right to make that decision.
But are you talking about a 16-year-old kid, or are you talking
That's up
about
to
a
the
5-year-old kid?
That's up to the
Because, see, if you're
parent.
talking about a 16-year-old kid, they're going to go to high school. They're out in the world. The world is there. You pick up the paper every day, and you'll read about some murder that happened. You'll read about some disaster, robberies. I mean, that's what happens in the world. Unfortunately, it's all there. To pick on rock music is a bizarre thing to do, given the society that we're in.
It isn't picking on rock music. It's picking on parts of the music that are objectionable to
But who's
many
going to
people.
decide? Who's going to decide that this one is explicit? What's explicit?
Let's take a comment from the audience.
Yes, Gus Enderlin with Citizens for America. And I do believe in censorship. As a parent and also a grandparent, I feel that I have the responsibility to know what my children and now my grandchildren are having. I believe that as responsible adults, we need to have some prerogatives and put out on the airwaves what ought to be there. What I'm hearing, and the reason I happen to be here today, is that generally those that are the most loose are the ones that are getting the airwaves. And I'm here to say that there is a silent majority that wants censorship.
I think that's a very small number of people in this country who want censorship. I mean, that sounds like fascism to me.
It does, but there was a recent poll, and I've got the figures here, where 56% of Americans listen to rock music, and 51% of that 56% want labeling.
No,
So it's
I don't
just
believe
not-
that poll. That poll doesn't sound valid to me at all.
Well,
I
was in
think it might be
yesterday's
higher
paper.
than
That's
that,
true.
Michael.
I don't think that's
No,
I don't think so,
much
because
higher in terms
I
of
mean,
wanting labeling. Labeling
that's
and
not,
censorship
no,
are two
that's
different
not
things.
true. I mean, if we just look at the number of people that buy records, that the 10 million people in America that bought Prince's album that, was mentioned on here, if we look at the, 36+ million people that bought Michael Jackson's album, the, 12 million that bought Bruce Springsteen's single last album, the 6 million that bought Madonna's last album.
It may all
I mean,
be
we
the
are talking
same, of
about, well, it's not the same. If you go to the concerts, you'll see that it's vastly different audiences. I mean, we're talking about a majority of people in rock music is popular music now. It's what Frank Sinatra was 20 years ago.
You're missing the point.
And people like to be able to buy these records.
Yeah, they want to buy records that are good rock, entertaining rock. Many of
Prince,
the
they
parents,
like to buy Prince.
if they want to buy Prince, fine. If they're 21, if they're 18, but if they're 10, and they obviously, if your
10,
son doesn't
if
have
they're
an allowance
10,
at 10 and can't go out and buy them, then he's not doing anything.
If they're 10 years old, they can't go out and buy a record without you knowing
correct.
about it.
Well, someone else in the audience there who hasn't spoken before. Yes, sir.
As an alcohol and drug counselor, that we often say that kids use drugs because of drugs and alcohol, because of the records they're listening to. We are finding that's not true, that we have kids who still listen to heavy metal and hard rock music, have been clean and sober 3 and 4 years, and are listening to the music. There are even clean and sober bands that play heavy metal music, and all their lyrics are about being clean and sober. And 10 years ago, when I was an alcoholism counselor, we were blaming drug and alcohol abuse in adolescence on the music. We're finding that's not true, that they can stay clean and sober and still listen to that music.
We got another comment from the audience. Yes, sir.
First of all, I study music, and in all types of music, from opera to rock, there's things that can be considered doom and gloom. Romeo and Juliet, for instance. If that's not about suicide, what is? If that can set a person off, I think music is basically a drama. It's an exaggerated thing of life, something exciting, something that's surreal.
From my investigation after my son's death, the music that I've listened to and that he has written all seems to be very depressing, devil worship type music.
Have you listened to much opera? All opera is depressing. All of it. Every single word ever written in opera is depressing. It's about love and death, period. All of it. Now, you're telling me if you banned this and your kid was listening to opera, would you or would you not be here saying the same
I'm
thing?
not saying we banned it. Don't misinterpret me.
Okay,
please.
even if you rated it or whatever, and your son couldn't listen to it and he listened to opera, and don't you think he'd be in the same spot if he listened to that music more so than he did his parents?
That would be that's a difficult question to answer because I don't think there is any answer to it.
In retrospect, Mr. McCullough, if you had this thing to live over again, what would you do differently? Would you monitor your son more closely or what?
Well, for one thing, if I had to do it all over again, I'd certainly try to find out what the words were to the songs. I heard the songs, and all I heard was basically what was played up there with the loud noise. And I'm not against rock and roll. I like rock and roll. But I did not know what the words were. And when I found out, excuse me, and when I found out what the words were, I couldn't believe that anybody could write them and anybody could produce and print them. I just couldn't believe it. Maybe I'm naive. I don't know.
And on that note, I think we've got to end this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Goldberg and Mr. McCallum and Carol Hallett, and to our studio audience for joining us.
Coming up later tonight, it's Animals, no, not the rock group, and it's Joe Cocker and Lord Mountbatten specifically. It's Hello Columbus, Mal Sharp out on the streets of San Francisco next tonight. Then at 9 o'clock, some of the animal mysteries of Australia. At 9 o'clock this evening, then it's Joe Cocker in concert. At 10 o'clock tonight with Lord Mountbatten, the last Viceroy Masterpiece Theater, tonight at 11 o'clock. Tonight's Express will be shown again tomorrow evening on Channel